Well, I took a midday nap. Well, an evening nap. I didn't mean to, but I did. And anyway, so I woke up at like 10:30. And I could barely talk. It's actually a lot better now than it was when I woke up. But what am I talking about? Okay, so we had a few more inches of snowfall, so I had to go outside and scrape and sweep the rig and do. I don't know. I'm just thinking about whatever it is you think about when you handle your business in Alaska, and then I see all these Christmassy lights, so I'm like, what the hell is that? And I turn around and there's like 4 cruisers right there at the spot on the road there, so I didn't think nothing of it. And then I came to the other side of the vehicle to scrape and sweep it, and then I became curious because the cops started getting out, and I heard the talking of the stop, and I don't like it. I know what happens when you involve yourself in police business. I've been on the receiving end of the shitty stick a few times in my day, so I just casually watch, like an observer for the purposes of research. And I was taking a break from doing the work anyway, and so I just watched, and the cops are out there, and they're like, open the door, They tell him repeatedly, or I don't know, I think it was a him. They tell him repeatedly to, it was a person. They tell him to roll down the window, They go through the multiple choice process that you do with trying to get a questionably resistant suspect to comply so it doesn't escalate. However, we're in Spenard, and I wouldn't say in the heart of Spenard, but close enough. We're like in the main artery of Spenard neighborhood. So I couldn't exactly see the driver, so I reoriented and to get a different perspective, and then I could see him. The lights coming from, I guess the perspective of the picture I snapped, just for posterity and to associate with this video as I posted on Facebook. I could see the man there. He was distraught. He was thinking. He was averse. Turned away. This person was turned away from the officers at the driver's window. There was one positioned at 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then the officer directly at 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and apparently there was a passenger in the peanut gallery, and it was an interesting moment, intimate even, seeing into like that space of time that exists between making a decision that has possibly permanent consequences, and one which is the easier, softer way, or the one that you'd be regretting if you did not make that decision. I could see him, man. And the cops kept yelling to him, like, stop reaching. Stop reaching. And that's what he was doing. He was kind of a person. Was rocking in the chair, just you could just tell, like, that moment of time where he was feeling like, fuck, what do I do? What am I gonna do? Calculating in an impossible situation. This is a very peculiar quality of, I don't know, I don't want to say the insane person, but they might be. This is a peculiar quality of the inability to have situational awareness and to understand when you have no power, and to then try to negotiate with yourself that you are in a position of power with maybe a way out. It's just, it boggles the mind. Like, I've been in that position many times, especially every single time I was in cuffs. I thought that I was in the right. I had negotiated with myself and come to the conclusion that, this is the best course of action. As my record will show, I never had the power. There was actually no course of action. There's only one outcome in that situation. And, I'm just rambling here because it's fucking 1:45 and I'm wired because I took an evening nap. I'm gonna go to the gym, but I'm just driving around now because I don't know. I think these things, they need to be talked about. I'm the kind of asshole that thinks that my perspective is right. But I could be wrong. I got the right to be wrong. I also got the right to learn. But how can I learn if I am indeed wrong, unless I come to a forum where I could present myself in, my naked ignorance with the attitude to be corrected and supported toward, a new awareness. So I think it's important to be a public idiot. There is the aversion to being wrong in front of people, or to being made a fool of, or finding out that where you once thought you were right, you got pawned. Like, I used to be afraid of that. And I still kind of am. It's just natural to not to avoid wanting to feel like a fool. I guess that's the words that come to mind, but it's important. It's very important. And this whole backstory, well, I didn't even finish that. So what ended up happening is, sorry, I'll go off on tangents like that, especially when I'm wired. What ended up happening is the man was contemplating his fate, weighing his options. The cops ran out of time. They had tried to reason with him, mano a mano. Then they started to issue, reasonable commands, or I don't know what the PC terminology is for that. I guess you could pick from many different ones. And while he sat there on his thumbs, this person, know, he's on the cops' time now. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And he fucked around, FAFO on that. And they told him, stop reaching. And he was, you know, displaying, you know, suspicious, unpredictable behavior. They said, get out of the fucking car. They're not fucking playing, bro. They told him that they were not fucking playing. And he still decided to negotiate with the situation and refused. Finally, they busted the window and they came in. They tried to pull him out. He refused. He was resisting being removed from the vehicle. And I just sat there and watched that poor person dig the ditch deeper until they yanked his ass out of the fucking car and put him on the ground in our freshly laid, you know, at least it wasn't pavement, but there might have been some ice under the few inches of snow on the ground. It's just, and then come to find out that there was a passenger in the back. Okay, we're in a situation in Alaska. You have ice on the windows, snow, you know, the difference of the humidity on the inside and outside of the vehicle. So you got foggy windows. You know, if I'm standing there, you know, a hand's width away or within an arm's length away from a vehicle I cannot see in that is occupied with suspicious people doing suspicious shit, you know, that's a high tension situation. And the cops, imperative is a word, but not. And the cops' job is to, you know, do what they've been trained to do, you know, serve and protect, which I don't think, but evidently something was going, like, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, the risk profile of you interacting with the cops is practically non-existent. Like, since I quit drinking and I follow the rules, you know, even reasonably, I haven't had a run-in with the police, and I don't even think the tag on my vehicle, I haven't even put the registration sticker on it. And I've been driving around for over a year here. Look, they're not gonna fuck with you. If you mind your fucking business and recognize whose team you're on and keep your nose out of shit where it doesn't fucking belong, you're gonna have an easy life. So this person doing suspect shit ends up pulled over, yanked out of the fucking car. It came out there was a gun under the front seat of the car. There's a perp in the back who, you know, saw what would happen if she didn't listen. Person got out of the car, got cuffed, you know, put the drugs in the front of the seat. So, like, here's the thing, they're dealing that god-awful, spiritually murderous fucking drugs, and they're literally lobotomizing the physiology of the human to become incapable of being a human. Like, the people that are the victims of this chemical warfare, they're losing their ability to be a human. The frontal lobe of our brain, the higher reason, cognitive functioning, you know, the ability to perceive and experience a higher power, to be able to wonder about connection, that part of the brain is being attacked by this drug. It's not just, you know, a psychedelic thing. It's not just, you know, feeling a little numb painkiller. I believe that these drugs, especially the synthetic ones, this is just what my own personal observation, which I think is a pretty accurate empirical observation, therefore valid. Fucking hot. These people that get on these drugs are losing their ability to come back as a human. And therefore, it's tough because you can't just scream at the person and, like, stop using, you know, figure it out. And then they're locked in this lifestyle to where they're very survival. The ability to eat, to find secure. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like this lifestyle that they become accustomed to, that becomes maybe not comfortable but normal. You can't reason with the person because they start to lose the ability to have a depth of context and understanding these ideas and how they associate across time, like talking about short-term gratification versus long-term consequences, temporary relief and solution at the risk of permanent change. Like, I don't think that people are able to understand this. I know I sure wasn't able to do it when I was fucked up. And thank God I wasn't on some of this, intravenous or, synthetically powerful, orders of magnitude shit that is out in the street. Now, I don't know specifically what drug it was or the quantity or what was going on, but obvious it was something that went south. You could tell that there was guilt by the inability to comply. I witnessed the perp's negotiation with making a decision to either escalate or de-escalate his situation. The cops were in a position to where, you can't just let this motherfucker go. They got to do their jobs, whether it's right or wrong, to be able to buy and sell and consume for recreational or economic profit the use of mood and mind-altering substances. Forget that argument for a second, okay? I lost my hook there. Yeah, cops just can't walk away from their job, They swear oaths and shit. Like, it's just not that fucking simple, okay? So all these people out here across the country, back in the defund the police shit, like, you guys are just, they have lost all perspective. This vanity that exists, and I don't know, I don't want to say the progressive or the left or the liberal mind, because it's just not that black and white. I don't play that fucking game, even though I have no choice but to use that vernacular and terminology sometimes in my writing or in my discussions about my opinion and my experience and my perspective. But this idea that humans are going to choose their own best interest and also their peers' best interest, it's asinine. It's just completely asinine. Humans do not operate that way. Self-preservation in the context of individual circumstances sets the tone for every decision that people make, for good or ill. And the cops told this motherfucker repeatedly. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that, motherfucker. That's just how I talk. The cops told this person, this suspect, repeatedly, get out of the car. Then, in this case, I know the way that the speech goes, but I can't hate the cops for saying, look, motherfucker, do you want to get shot? Like, I can't quote them verbatim, I can't remember all, but they warned the perpetrator of the consequences of not complying. So thank God that he didn't make a fatal mistake and he got dragged out face down on the ground. Now he has a chance to continue in his life rather than ending up like the poor young lady who was shot by some fucking dumbass. It's like, I know people are tired of hearing about this, and I didn't actually want to talk about that. It wasn't the intention of me making this video. But however, the two incidences are symbiotically linked in the consciousness of man, And that lady there did the same thing. Negotiated with the situation where she had no power, and then made a selfish decision out of fear for self-preservation that unfortunately triggered another idiot reaction in a situation that never should have been, and she died. You know, and now she's a martyr, but her children are motherless. Where are they gonna go? And if there was a partner, I don't have all the deets on all of it, but you know, it's just needless. But there's the caveat, you know, the juxtaposition that, you know, is this the kind of shit that needs to happen for people to get perspective for these like underlying currents of our affairs and the different costs or demographics of our society? Are these things needed to bring these percolate bubble to the surface so we can address these things that get swept under the rug so often? The problem is that when they come to the table, when they're presented in this sudden impact, you know, crash, cataclysm kind of presentation, you know, like suddenly here's the shit. When it comes across like that, this is similar to a person receiving unsolicited criticism. It is not received well by the intended party. So when this shit happens in the world, you know, we don't fucking like it. Boom, we get emotionally charged. Now we have to take sides or avoid it. You know, this apathetic, you know, not my monkey, not my circus attitude is a fucking cancer in our society. You know, because if nobody's responsible, then who can complain? You know, like if we're all silence is complicity. You know, if we're all like that, how can any responsibility or what are the words I'm trying to find here? You know, if there's a situation to arise, how can we identify? You know, how can we, you know, navigate crises, you know, strategically to avoid a repetition of them in the future? Even in the same situation, like how many times do we have to learn the lesson? It just sucks, man. You know, and I ain't gonna lie, I curiously witnessed this. Normally I would just go on about my business, you know, because I know how these things can escalate, and I like to argue, I like to fight, but I don't particularly like stupid ass drama. I was just curious about what was gonna happen, and as I saw the tone of the situation develop, I was like, oh shit, is this going to, you know, am I gonna hear the guns go off, you know? Anyways, I ain't gonna lie, I said, thank you, officer, afterwards, because even though I'd say that, you know, police protect and serve, blah, 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 they don't really. They just show up to sign the paperwork, pretty much. In a crisis situation that is not initiated by the police, you know, they become the third party to the situation, which is typically already reached the crisis point and gone over to where the consequences are being distributed. In the case of this incident between the two parties, it was the cop and the suspect. If it does end up in court and the truth, becomes certified by the judge that this was a lawful stop, there were illegal regulated substances, the perp had the gun, was displaying, behavior that warrants, certain kinds of escalation by the police to use force, then thank you for your job. Thank you, officer. And this segues, into what happened in Minnesota and other things involving law enforcement, which spit in the face of these people who simply think we can defund the police and everything is going to be okay. Dude, if you take the cops away, this place will turn even worse, because humans are constitutionally incapable of organizing and policing their own behavior. This has been demonstrated in our written history, oral tradition. Like, it is an indisputable fact that over a long enough time frame, utopia devolves into Thunderdome. So I just, fucking idiots, defund the police and see what you're gonna get, And if you're not gonna involve yourself in somebody else's business and fight for what's right, or offer your opinion or come to the table to negotiate or offer any mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical capital of this situation, if it's not my monkey, not my circus, bro, dude, your world is going to look like shit, because it just doesn't happen that way. Society needs organized compliance, and an organized compliance arm that is effective at using force to underwrite order. Read the record, dude. And when I spend, my quality, priceless time on social media, I'm in swipe life. And it's because I'm a curious student of human character and perspective. And I have a voracious appetite for trying to understand all our different perspectives and how they contribute for good or ill to our conglomerate situation. And I don't know everything. I've been learning over time. But it's important that we do this, man. We can't just all go our own way and do our own thing and then hope that, when we come to situations where we have no other option but where we intersect, we aren't mutually exclusive of one another in this manifestation. We rely on each other in various capacities to various yokes of responsibility, and these have limits. There's boundaries. So all this is a lot to try to digest in the current political climate, where a significant slice of the pie of the population is completely averse to the kind of force we see being used by the current administration, Gestapo kind of organization, blue plutocrats, technocrats, the deep state, whatever side of the aisle you're on, whatever your language is, people don't like it. But you have to understand what's necessary, though. I think that this is the unfortunate truth of this concept of lesser of two evils, that I don't want to accept lesser of two evils. Like, for some reason, I remember years ago I asked Mom, well, why did you vote for Bush? Or I think that was it. She said he was the lesser of two evils. I mean, at the time I was too socially ignorant to be able to understand, one, why she would do that, and two, why she would use that concept to contextualize how she was going to vote for a person. Like, so, contrast this with the idea of, well, the Reaper shows up and says, okay, bud, it's your time. Here you got choices, though, all right? You're gonna go, but you got choices, okay? You can be burned alive, we're gonna chop your head off, you're gonna be hanged, or we're gonna tie you to a greased up pole and then light the bottom on fire. These are all legitimately verifiable ways of which humans torture one another and kill them. Anyways, what does it matter? Death shows up and it's your time, then acts like you have a choice in the matter of a lesser of two evil. It's one of my favorite words. Completely asinine. So, oh my God. I think about this a lot. I'm 32 minutes in now, but I'm just going to keep talking. You don't have to keep listening if anybody actually opens this up and listens to it. But why is this interesting to me? I'll tell you why. It's because I was a victim, like a lot of us are, and a lot of our children, and just in general. This is a structural crack in the fabric of traditional education, social education, these unwritten rules of human behavior. I was a victim of not being privy to information that was of current events. It's just like, if I'll just use a vaccine for an example, measles or polio, it's like someone suffering from a problem that's already been fixed. Why does that happen? I mean, I believe that it shouldn't happen, and we should be doing everything we can to ensure that it doesn't happen. Now, that's, obviously ideological utopia. I know it's not going to be that way all the time. However, some of the shit that goes on in the world, bro, it's like, are you fucking kidding me? I can't believe this shit. And, like I say a lot, it's not rocket science. The charge situation in Minnesota, all these other things, which there's no good answer about any of them. It reminds me of Floyd, all the needless deaths, by the cops, all the needless deaths of the cops, of, civilians, of, illegal, all these labels and stickers and masks and everything. None of this shit actually has to happen. And there's plenty of examples in the record and living today where it doesn't happen because people aren't that fucking stupid. You know, they have prioritized their systems to ensure against this. So like the kind of testing and preparation that goes into ensuring as best they can the investment of a space vehicle or the production of an automobile where there is large risk at fault of either physical, financial, or biological risk of damage or loss. They use the systems as best they can to ensure that that doesn't happen. This is the major bottleneck in human affairs, which is throttling our ability to move past these things. The stupid shit that happens. Why is this person at 1 in the morning negotiating whether it's a good idea to pull his gun, which I can't predict to be in the mind of the person at the time, but the record may end up showing that there's a lot of indication that this was a possibility. Why is he out there? It just don't need to be that way. Peddling, I don't know if they were the purchaser or the issuer, the distributor, the market maker. There's so much more to life than those things which have, let's just say that the type of options that can occur from pursuit along that kind of life, they aren't, there's not a lot of prosperity there. So what is it that motivates the mind of a person to hang out in a cul-de-sac ideological space, which is high risk, chance of failure, a lot of times negative returns, no returns, aggression, all these other things that go with either being a drug addict or a drug dealer or both. Somebody who is unable to intellectually, cognitively, morally understand why we have laws, why we need them to be enforced, why at times that it seems like we have to break the law to enforce the law. That's a real big one. If we can't solve some of these fucking problems we have socially, try solving that one. Why do we have to break the law to enforce the law? I'm still working that one out. If I haven't worked it out yet, I think the chances are that this is just one of those systemically ingrained things that we can't work out until something else, like a mega shift in our inherent nature, our intrinsic, genetics, shifts. Until that happens, that kind of shit isn't going to stop. And that's another thing that I'm really interested in. It's just if we know something bad is going to happen, why don't we stop it from happening? Obviously I'm going to ask myself that question in my own life. I know the reasons why in every context that I could go back generally. When it comes to society, is less more, or is more, is more or less? Are we going to Well, first off, I think we got to ask, are we able, if we come together and unite one mind, able to change the circumstances of a situation in which we determined to do it? I think so. Therefore, is there like, let's just take the population of Anchorage, 300 plus, 400,000 people. And we decide that there's going to be a sidewalk on every lineal foot of public road. It's not debate jurisdiction here, just on every public use way, a walkable trail in the whole fucking city. And this is a goal that we unify and agree that needs to be done. Let's just say for some extraneous circumstance of we just fucking want it. How do we organize to get that change? Is it going to be the municipality's responsibility of the taxpayer, that these taxes come out of the property or sales? Like, what does it take to actually get shit done? This is another very interesting issue I have in understanding, human psychology and, personal motivation, external validation, like this whole jockeying thing that happens, and doing the things that we do, but within the context of what benefits everybody. It's just like, how are you, work-life balance, is it that? What about the things that we do because they are right? This is one thing I have about recycling. Here in the United States, blah, 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 the greatest country on the face of the earth, and all these, Trumpisms about the United States. Why haven't we mandated recycling regardless of the cost? We subsidize an orders of magnitude profitable regime, the oil companies. We subsidize that industry as taxpayers, it's tax incentives, and now we're subsidizing all these. There's tax incentives for these big companies now. The big trend industries, data centers, manufacturing facilities. This is actually kind of contrary to capitalist ideals of a free market, but really it's just chaotic capitalism. I wouldn't exactly call it honorable capitalism. Is the government a free agent in enterprise, in the marketplace? Because they don't play with the same rules that private individuals or even private companies play. The government has special privileges in the marketplace. Is this a violation of free market capitalism? I think so. So, government tax incentives, subsidies, all of these vehicles and instruments and derivative assets that they use to gain advantage in the marketplace. After all this shit, we can't put together a system which is right. Recycle the trash. We can't mandate that. Are you fucking kidding me? These are one of the things that it just boggles my mind. And I know it because I don't fucking recycle. Why? It's not that important to me. Why? I know it's the right thing to do. It makes sense, but it's inconvenient as fuck. There's no financial incentive. I don't have the receptacles. Like, my life isn't accommodated to make recycling, for one, convenient. Two, I can't see the benefits, at my point of use, I can't see the benefits on a medium term or long-term scale. So even though we know that, intellectually, cognitively, that recycling is a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Recycle the trash, make use of it, clean trails, if you bring it in, take it out. However, in the most developed country in the world, or one of the most, we just don't fucking do it, okay? At UAA, I see the recycling receptacles they have out. Okay, looks good, right? People are going to recycle. No, they don't. They put the wrong thing in the wrong slot. Oh. So even if recycling is made to be convenient, if it's fucking idiot-proof, the labels, people still don't do it. And you can't exactly force them to do it because nobody is around to police them when they're about to do it. Oh my God. Oh. So you see, unless there is a fucking cop, standing at the gates of hell, they're gonna get out. The demons are coming out of hell. If there's no sentry at the gates, if in heaven, the perfect world, with the perfect people and the perfect situation, there's still gonna be trash that the fucking idiot refuses to put in the receptacle. Oh my God. So you're gonna have to have cops in heaven, bro. It's just the nature of who we are and what we do. So knowing this, we can engineer systems to increase the efficiency that, what is good and what is right. It becomes the statistical probability. We can increase the statistical probability that the desired outcome will happen, over short, mid, or even long-term timelines. Like, we have the capacity and the power to do that, but we don't. I think it's on my wall. We, the United States, ship our trash to the third world. We should be embarrassed of ourselves. And tell me the carbon calculation, okay? I would like any fucking climate carbon apologist or advocate to come forward and calculate for me the credit equation of 100 tons of fucking plastic waste that gets shipped from the United States landfill or wherever to the fucking Philippines or wherever in Southeast Asia this goes, for them to do whatever they do, whether they burn. I think the video I watched was they're burning the plastic in the manufacture of tofu. How do you calculate the carbon on that shit? This is another area of society where we have plenty of information to make, to assess the situation and make a good decision. And we still do this stupid ass shit. Our priorities are all jacked the fuck up. Why? How do we create and craft incentives which inspire, motivate, reward and any other positive adjective I could use to describe, the adoption of behavior that is, moves the fucking car down the road. It isn't heading toward the cliff. And it sucks because information is the most valuable commodity, even if it's wrong. But anyways, I'll do that sometimes. Just go off on tangents because everything is connected. The butterfly that flaps its wings, does connect to, the fart in New York. Whatever that thing was. Everything is connected to another. So one thing that we do here reverberates through time and space and affects another one. And if we really want to enjoy a manifestation of peace and prosperity and alleviation for the suffering of innocent people who needlessly suffer, I think about that shit constantly, but at the same time, I'm aware of my own hypocrisy and my powerlessness to do anything. Man, using some of my argument, it may or may not be able to be justified that these small little things, like my effort to, let's just say I'm going to clean the Bronco out, and right where I'm at, my only chance is to throw my plastic waste in with my organic waste in the trash can at the gas station. That has been decided by, my brain and the situation that this is the best choice that I should do. Even though I know that I should probably recycle this. It's the good and right thing to do. But in a cost-benefit analysis situation, or a time-based calculation, or even the idea that it doesn't matter, all the trash goes in the trash receptacle, the trash goes in the truck goes to the landfill or the recycling center where there is a specific purpose to do it. And then even after all that, let's just say that the plastic gets sorted from the organic material and ends up segregated. Okay, now it has the chance to be recycled and saved from becoming microplastic filth in some Indonesian dude's nuts 20 years in the future. But no, it still ends up in some Indonesian man's nuts 20 years in the future, because the person who was trusted to recycle the fucking plastic shipped the shit across the Pacific fucking Ocean to some third world so they could burn the fucking plastic to make genetically modified tofu. I'm not accusing Southeast Asia of making genetically modified tofu, but given the way things are going, there's not a lot of insurance against the possibility of Indonesia's or the Philippines and Southeast Asia's fucking soybeans becoming GMO crops. So after this big long rant, 54 minutes now, I don't see it as a rant. I see it as a philosophical monologue into some issues that are important, on perspectives that maybe some people don't think about, but I feel it is my duty to bring to the table some way, in some form. And for those who are interested in what I think, they're few and far between, but as a human, I have to believe that my ideas are valid, even if they are wrong. If I constantly second guess myself, or I discount, the possibility of contribution to the narrative that might influence someone to think differently. The butterfly effect. I can't run my life like that. And I think that we need to talk about this shit. We got to talk about why the guy is, pulled over by the cops at, midnight in a shitty part of the neighborhood, tripping out on some stupid ass fucking drugs, carrying around some pistol because he feels like he might need to use it, with some dumbass in the peanut gallery who's unfortunately believed this person's bullshit to be involved with them. Maybe they're the perpetrator, who knows? Like, dude, life is so much more to offer than that. We can't, I don't know, maybe you can. See, this is where we say that you can't force somebody to change. You can't. It's wrong. It's wrong to force somebody to change. I don't believe that shit. If you see someone who is headed off the cliff, it is morally, spiritually, just so hollow to be so apathetically validated to watch someone go to their own destruction. I think that is one of the worst qualities of the human. And when you're a baby, okay, and you're playing in something you shouldn't be. Mama comes in and she reacts and smacks your ass or whatever happens. I know that there's a context to everything, but I think it is somewhat true, and not to use it because it's biblical. Just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's biblical, even though it is in the Bible, it's biblical. Spare the rod, spoil the child. So if we don't learn to use force in a way in our society and our lives which increases the increases the stabilizing of the oscillation between negative and positive outcomes. If we can't stabilize order in society, we have to use some kind of force. That's why they call it a force field. Force fields keep the universe together. Matter is formed with force fields. There is order. If it were not order, it would be chaos, and then chaos is destabilization. It's the inability to maintain a form. We need force fields in human society to make sure that it operates in predictable ways which produce results of our intentions. And for us to just say, not my monkey, not my circus, not my job, bro. It's their responsibility to figure their own shit out when these people are losing their capacity, if they ever had it in the first place. There's no guarantee a significant percentage of the people suffering in drug addiction, trauma, recidivism and crime. These people, if they even have the physiological capacity to comprehend order and cultural norms and shit like that, because they probably grew up in a fucking shitty psychotic home, maybe had a genetic predisposition to some epigenetic outcome in their environment. They never had a chance, and then they throw gas on the fire via sustained chronic stress and trauma through the formative years, which program the brain, influenced by secondary effects of addiction, consequences, children of drug addict parents, mental illness. A lot of these are comorbidities that exist in a significant part of the population of, the homeless, the mentally ill, the addicted, the indigent, the felon, and even in the Stepford wife kind of white picket fence lifestyle that America has told us is the object of our existence. It is our duty as humans, with a vested interest in the continuity of our species and our development, that we be frank with one another, that we bring ourselves naked to the court, in front of the king and the queen, and we share our grievance. That's a sacred right and duty of each one of us to be able to do in whatever court we find ourselves in. It doesn't have to be in Washington, D.C. It doesn't have to be down on fucking 5th Street or wherever, 4th Street, 3rd Street. It doesn't have to be, at the library where the assembly meets, It doesn't have to be in the office of the manager of the business. It doesn't have to be at the business meeting, at the clubhouse. Courts of social gossip and grievance, jockeying, where we talk about things that are important. It's the most sacred institution, and it doesn't have to just exist in the courtroom either, because that place is psychotic. There's a reason that Lady Justice or whoever wears the blindfold, is because who alone can become the arbiter, or the judge, the jury, and executioner, or what one institution can be responsible for that. As we see now with the ability of organized groups to stack the court, to increase, like, people praise our government, our 3 branches of government system, and it's pretty good innovation for the materialistic advancement of society. It's been proven to do that. But our more where real value comes from in the human, our spiritual currency, this motherfucker hasn't done shit for it. Maybe that's a big extreme, but I don't know. I seem to think that we have been treading water for thousands of years. We have made no real significant advancement in spiritual science whatsoever. The clues are out there. There are instances where there have been, great strides in spiritual knowledge and execution. Not here in America, bro. The freedom of religion thing has devolved into the destruction of spirit itself. And has devolved into some mystical, new age, Aquarian kind of ideal that's very ephemeral, and I don't know, it's not substantial. I belong to a metaphysical group, well, at least I used to, until I had a row with somebody who was a fucking dick, so I stopped going. But they get together and they talk metaphysics in this fluffy circle. I mean, it's like a party. We get together to celebrate our fantasy. The world, humans, we need where the rubber meets the road. our material science to be able to have traction to get this fucking vehicle moving, to make sure it brakes. Therefore, we cannot afford to create markets in subjective phenomena. We need something that's substantially objective. So, opinions are great. We need the sacred place to come and bring it. But at the end of the day, we have to assume ownership of the truth, which generally means compromising our illusions. So I think people are wrong. We have to look out for one another, and we have to come to learn to enjoy. I call it the fight, or the I call it verbal combat, where we exchange ideas and maybe even a reckless way to find out, where, oh shit, like I feel like a fool now, like, oh, I need to change, or, we need that, man. And this whole PC culture about, well, you don't belong at the table unless you have, unless you got it, like the freshman doesn't belong at the table of the PhDs. That's bullshit, man. We need diversity of opinion, but unity in action. Aligned along the truth. And, people argue about the truth, and they say, your truth, my truth, the truth is not variable. It's a mathematical function. Philosophy is mathematics. The language of mathematics is universal, just the same as our philosophy that underwrites the quality of human behavior. There is no negotiating 1 + 1. Just as the same as there's no negotiating, ways to handle people in society and things to do. We got to start teaching ourselves that, truth is a mathematical reality. I know it's a bit idealistic, and I am kind of ranting now, I guess, because I'm tired. I'm here at the gym. I need to go in, so I can't ramble all day. But I don't know. It just connects to so many things. This is the way my mind works. One thing leads to another, and I just hate to see people freezing out here. I hate people freezing outside. I have a place where I stay, but nobody else is allowed. Like that, fundamentally in my heart, like I don't like that. And I don't own anything myself outright, as far as society agrees, and I can't extend that. I feel powerless. Nobody likes that. Well, why is our situation, why is society structured in a way in which we believe that suffering is a requisite to making decisions, or to learning to make decisions on a long timeline. To be suffering is the currency that pays for the insurance policy against things not happening again. I don't know. It's too vague of a perspective for me. It's just not. It's not like that. All right, I'm done. Don't do drugs, kids.